So a little bit, a little bit of background. I've been working in the psychedelic space for the last 7.5 years, organizing educational events, conferences, helping different activists connect with each other. Actually, I got a workshop coming up here on the template on Sunday, it's the 6th, right? November the 6th at 3 o'clock. We're going to have an activation workshop for anyone who wants to get involved in the psychedelic or drug policy reform, harm reduction space. Don't know where to plug in. Come hang out on Sunday the 6th here. In the meanwhile, though, I'm going to answer your questions. So anybody who would like, what is a question you have for me about psychedelics or drug policy, harm reduction, anything in that realm, and I will answer it. So raise your hand if you have a question, or I can just go on a riff a little bit on some other things that are going on in this space. All right, we got a question. Why is it illegal when everyone wants it to be legal? So history of the drug war is an interesting one. So the drug war started with Richard Nixon, and it was also escalated with the Reagans, yes. So the Controlled Substances Act was in 1970. Basically, there are quotes on the record from Nixon's advisors that said, at this period of history, basically the Nixon administration had two enemies. There was a civil rights movement, so there were black leaders, and there was the anti-war movement, which was the hippies. And you couldn't make it illegal to be black or to be against the war. But you could criminalize the activities of these communities. You could criminalize the activities the hippies did. You could criminalize activities of the black community and then police them, vilify them on the news. There's a whole quote about this on the record from one of Nixon's advisors. So the drug war was always a political thing. It was always about trying to criminalize behaviors of political opponents. And in many ways, there's a book called The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, and there's also a good documentary on Netflix called 13th, which is about the 13th Amendment, and it's basically Michelle Alexander's work is that basically when Jim Crow laws ended, segregation, the drug war basically replaced that in this country. It was the new Jim Crow. And if you look at the rates of arrest in the country in the drug war, it's very disproportionately black and brown people that are in prisons. And it's kind of like the new continuation version of segregation in our country. But that's why we have a drug war. Any other questions? Psychedelics, drug policy, harm reduction. The laws are changing, actually. So I don't know if you're aware of this, but in the 2020 election, Oregon had on its ballot an initiative that was passed that legalized psilocybin services. Also, they used the word decriminalized all drugs. I would actually say they just made the penalties less severe. So there's no longer criminal penalties, but there's civil penalties for possession of various substances. And there's a similar ballot initiative this year in a few weeks' time in Colorado called the Natural Medicine Health Act. And that will both decriminalize psychedelics as well as set up legal regulated access frameworks for them. So there's a lot of motion now to change these laws. And also, Joe Biden recently made an executive order. He's pardoning former possession, a federal simple possession of cannabis. No one actually was released from prison for that, but people's records are being expunged. And he's also urged governors to do the same. So if governors pardon marijuana possession offenses, that very well will lead to a lot of people coming out of prison. And potentially marijuana will be rescheduled, or descheduled even better, very soon. So things are in motion. Yeah. Drug policy reform. All right, what else we got here? What other questions we got? Don't be shy, y'all. What do you want to know? All right, yes. Oh, you were first. What's the research like in this field? There's a lot of research. So the research that's furthest along is by an organization called MAPS. That's the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, MAPS.org. And they are taking MDMA, which you may know as ecstasy, through the FDA for treatment of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. It is in the third and final phase of FDA trials. So MDMA is very likely going to be an FDA, or rather MDMA-assisted therapy is going to be an FDA-approved medicine and therapy in the very near future is what it's looking like. There's also a lot of psilocybin research, which is, of course, the active chemical in magic mushrooms. And psilocybin is being most studied for treatment of depression right now. And one of the interesting areas is actually in cancer patients. There's a lot of research where folks that have existential depression, turns out if you give them a really high dose of psilocybin, and you can induce what's called a mystical experience pretty reliably. And this mystical experience correlates with people having relief from this existential depression, which is pretty profound. That's happening in Hopkins and NYU and other places. There's a lot of other research, but those are the top areas. Can someone hand me that pink water bottle over there, actually? Thank you. Thank you, Judge Buster. Any other you had a question? Thank you. I'm going to get hers, and then, yeah. All right, sustainability of plant medicine, and so the difference between using the plant medicine versus a synthetic version made in a lab. That's a really good question. So are we counting fungus as when you say plant medicine? Right. And fungus, of course, is not technically a plant, but a lot of people, when they talk about plant medicine, they're also talking about mushrooms. Mushrooms are definitely a very sustainable, so you can grow mushrooms very easily. And so that's probably the most sustainable way for psychedelics to be used. Some of the psychedelics are synthetic, like LSD, created by Albert Hoffman, who's on my T-shirt, is a synthetic. So there's not like an LSD tree, although it is derived from LSA, which does grow naturally. MDMA also is a synthetic. They all have natural things they're derived from. Are there substances in particular you had a question about the natural versus synthetic version of? MDA, yeah, and then derived from that is MDMA. And so I can't speak to the sustainability of the sassafras itself, and I don't know if it's in any danger. Unsustainable? Yeah. Okay. Okay, so MDMA, maybe Owen, you know more than I do about this particular one. Yeah, so we might actually need new sources for MDMA. I think this is a very, I don't know enough to give you a good answer to that, but it's a great question that we should be asking. Another related question, it's a little bit tangential here, because I'm going to talk now about an animal medicine. The toad, yes, 5-MeO-DMT, 5-methoxydimethyltryptamine, which is harvested from the bufo alvarius toad, the Sonoran Desert toad. So people catch these toads and pop their pimples basically and get 5-MeO-DMT. And there's a lot of questions around the ethics of that. And this is an area where, yeah, maybe using synthetic 5-MeO-DMT is more ethical than harvesting from the Sonoran Desert toads. But yeah, this is a very good question of the. But there's some would say, some cultures might believe that. So let's look at, another good example is mescaline. So mescaline comes from predominantly two different cacti. One is peyote, one is San Pedro or Huachuma. So peyote actually is something that is endangered, and there's a lot of pushback from the Native American Church currently, because there's Decrim initiatives happening all around the country, and the Native American Church has been saying, hey, we don't want you to include peyote in your Decrim initiatives in all these cities around the country, because we're worried that it's going to increase the demand for peyote, which takes about 15 years to grow. And so there's a lot of concern about sustainability of peyote. However, San Pedro or Huachuma cactus it grows very fast. So if you're going to use mescaline, it's recommended probably sourced from the Huachuma better than sourcing it from peyote. So which natural sourcing you're using is also a good question. Yeah, so Judge Buster, you had a question?
So I saved this guy diving out a window because I told him and reminded him that he was hitting on his friend's who was present's wife.
Sure, it's actually a question.
Yeah, and so which kind was he probably on?
Which kind? I don't know what drugs your friend was on. I can't answer that question. Yeah, I don't know. I wasn't there. All right, we have other questions? Last question. Sorry? Psilocybin? Are you asking if it's legal in Colorado? It's not legal in Colorado. So in Denver a few years ago, in the city of Denver, they did pass the deprioritization of the enforcement of psilocybin. So on the books, psilocybin mushrooms are still illegal in Denver and in the state of Colorado, but in the city of Denver, the enforcement of those laws is now designated to be the lowest law enforcement priority. However, there is a ballot initiative right now on the ballot for the coming election in a couple weeks' time called the Natural Medicine Health Act. And if that passes, then it will actually decriminalize the possession of not only psilocybin, but various other psychedelics. It's illegal, but it's not enforced. It's on the books still illegal in Denver, but it's deprioritized. There are state laws against psilocybin still in the state of Colorado. So on the state level, it is still illegal. It may not be. It's not really being enforced. So you're right. There was Decrim passed. What that Decrim did, this is getting very, very technical, but like the Decrim, what we call Decrim that's passed in Denver and also in many other cities, like the Decrim Natures Acts that passed in Oakland and passed in DC. There's a bunch of cities around the country that decriminalize psychedelics. What they actually did, they didn't actually change any laws. Psychedelics are still illegal on the state level in all these places. But what happened is the city is saying, hey, we're not enforcing these, basically. So it's effectively decriminalized in cities like Denver, but technically the law is still the same. So it's a technicality there. Well, then there's the federal laws are a whole other thing, right? So there's the federal, state, and local level, and there's different levels of legality and illegality there. But yeah, Colorado may very well, on the state level, make it not illegal anymore to possess a bunch of different psychedelics, which is very cool and exciting. Yeah. All right, is that our time? Okay, that is all for Psychedelic Q&A today. Thank you. And if you liked that, so I'm going to be facilitating a workshop. Folks who want to get involved in this space. It's going to be here at the Template, Sunday, November 6th at 3 o'clock. Come see me if you want more information about it. My platform is called Psychedelic Seminars, or we call it PsychSems for short. And that's spelled PsychSems. That's my Instagram handle, my Twitter handle. That is my website. I've got free videos online of long-form conversations with various experts at psychsems.com, PsychSems. And yeah, come to this workshop. I'm just going to do this segment, Psychedelic Q&A, and a comedy show the night before over here. So if you want information on all those links, come see me. Thank you for being here, y'all, and we're going to keep rolling with the show shortly. Thank you.